Hello and welcome to episode number 95 of the Perth to Paisley podcast covering Heart of Midlothian, as you all know by now. However, there is a slight difference this week. Last week we explained that Adam was in Canada and may or may not be able to be in attendance. He's not, so I've upgraded. I've drafted in fellow podcaster, voice of Hearts TV, and the guy that without him this podcast wouldn't even exist in the first place. It is Laurie Dunsire. Laurie, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm intrigued as to how I am the cause
Yeah.
of Perth to Paisley or the inspiration, depending how you want to look at it.
It's because I don't actually know if we've ever said this on the podcast before. We might have, but I can't remember. Basically, you contacted myself and Adam independently to work with the Hearts women's team a couple of years ago. And that's how me and Adam met. And then one night driving back from Kilmarnock away, we were in the car and Adam was like, Laurie's got a podcast. We should do a podcast. I was like, okay. So yes, indirectly, you're the reason we get abuse every week on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. It's much appreciated. So yes, got Laurie in. We've got a lot to speak about because it's actually Adam goes away and the world ends and everything happens basically. So we're recording this on Tuesday the 2nd. It's going out tomorrow. However, this afternoon there was a very eventful day as we finally found out who one of two teams we will be playing in our Europa League playoff. Hearts were drawn either against Linfield or FC Zurich. The results of that obviously are dependent on the two-legged affair between those two sides. We managed to avoid Fenerbahce, Olympiacos, Partizan Belgrade, teams that I saw a lot of Hearts fans kind of saying they were nervous about getting as we didn't have much of a chance. The draw has been met with pretty much favourable reviews. How do you feel about the two teams that we are potentially playing?
I was quite pleased. I think you highlighted already some of the teams that I certainly would have wanted to avoid. Fenerbahce, I think, were the big one. Olympiacos, you mentioned, although their result in their last game suggested they're not as strong as they have been. I would be lying if I said I knew much about the current Olympiacos team, but as names go, they're a regular. You often see them in the Champions League group stages, a tough place to go. Partizan, I think you mentioned, apart from anything, just such a tough away leg. And given we have almost zero European experience in the modern day, I don't know if we're quite ready for a Serbian trip against a decent side. So it could have been better, but it could have been a lot worse. I think of the two teams, most people are expecting it to be FC Zurich, and that's demonstrated by the fact everyone's already posting their travel plans, albeit until tomorrow, which might be when people are listening, Wednesday, nothing is set in stone. There is that sort of 24 hours just to make sure everything can take place on a certain day. So I think it will be in Switzerland on Thursday the 18th, but Hearts have already tried to just reiterate to fans that they are not guaranteeing that if people are deciding to make travel arrangements.
Basically subtweeting Joel Sked, essentially, if you go into his Twitter. But yeah, I saw some people say that Linfield have a chance, which of course they're in the draw. They absolutely do. They were kind of easily swept aside by Bodo Glimt across their two legs. However, FC Zurich has been the kind of focus of attention because they've been through an interesting last few years. They finished 7th and 8th in the Swiss League 2 and 3 years ago, but last season they actually comfortably won the Swiss League. However, of that starting 11 that most often played, 6 of them have departed, including the management team as well. And I believe the current manager used to manage the Austrian national team, I think. Yeah.
I read that, And they've lost their top scorer, who apparently got around bang on or around 30 goals last season, Gambian international. So like you've probably read all the snippets. It's only been a matter of hours since the draw was made, so I would be lying again if I said I had a huge in-depth knowledge of FC Zurich. But I was surprised when I first looked and said, actually they comfortably won the league last year, because the Swiss league, although it's not one of the best leagues in Europe, young boys, FC Basel, you see them on the European circuit quite often. So to comfortably win it was quite impressive. But yeah, the reports seem to be that their team have been completely torn apart. Their manager's gone, and they've started this season relatively poorly. So maybe not as daunting as comfortable Swiss champions suggest. But at the same time, let's not beat around the bush. FC Zurich will be looking at that draw as well and going, that's a good team for us to get, because let's not hide from the fact that in pot one we were one of the probably weaker teams. So they'll be delighted. We'll be relatively pleased. I think it's a game which gives both teams a good chance of getting through to the group stage. And I suppose that the fact, and I know Joel Sked reported this first of all, the fact it won't be played at their home ground, to me, without again reading too much into it, is a little bit of an advantage. They're playing about 50 miles away in St. Gallen, so it's the equivalent of Hearts playing at Tannadice for the home leg instead of playing at Tynecastle. And that, to me, that takes a little bit away from it. I think their home ground is a bit open with the running track, but they're going to a different ground. I assume they won't have as many fans in it, making a 50-mile trip on a midweek. That's probably a bit of a hassle for a few people. So hopefully that'll play to us a little bit. And we've got the away leg first. I always like the away leg first.
That's what I was going to ask you.
You take them back to your place. You know what you've got to do. If we can get to Tynecastle within a goal of them, I'd be pretty happy. If we could try and maybe get a draw or just a narrow defeat, I think that puts us in a good place, in my view.
I think that's very, very fair. And the amount of people I've seen just more excited about the occasion. Craig Gordon was interviewed on Sky today, and he said that a lot of the squad, because as you mentioned, he's kind of the only person in the squad with consistent European experience. And most of the guys just came out of training today and just wanted to see who the draw was, and were kind of happy with anybody because they want to get to experience Tynecastle on a European night. Something I've not really had, because I wasn't at Birkirkara as I was working, and I'm glad I wasn't there because that was a different experience. But then going back to group stages, I wasn't old enough to be at many of the games. I was at AEK Athens, I was at friendly against Osasuna and Murrayfield and stuff like that, but I've not properly experienced a European night apart from Spurs and Liverpool. They were the two ones, but we just got battered by Spurs within like 15 minutes. So it's going to be an exciting game, at least, unless we're 5-0 down in the first leg.
I mean, famous last words. I can't see it being anything like that, but, there will be a good side. So I think we'll do well to just come back to Tynecastle still in the tie, and then hopefully take the game to them in the home match. But no, I mean, European games are terrific, especially at Tynecastle. I've had a few of them. I mean, the Liverpool and Spurs ones, obviously, very good atmospheres, albeit disappointing results in the end, Spurs especially. But Stuttgart was one of my first European games, and that one really stands out. There was only about 14,000 that night, but that was a terrific atmosphere. And obviously, we were a Gordan Petric sitter away from turning that game around, and it was 5 goals, 2 red cards. It was a bit manic. And Bordeaux was a big disappointment, albeit it was a good atmosphere to begin with, because we actually managed to get one of our best European results away from home and then threw it away in the home leg. So under the lights at Tynecastle, I'm glad it's Tynecastle and not Murrayfield. I don't know if you noticed, we're having to upgrade things like the lights.
Okay.
So I didn't see it happening around the full stand, but when we played the Gary Lock testimonial game, they were still along the concourse in the Wheatfield stand because our lighting had to be improved for group stage football.
Oh, is that what that was? Right.
Yeah, so the lights have been replaced. I know the studio at the back of the main stand, where obviously Mr. Borthwick and Gary Wales sit but every second week. That has to be extended slightly because that's not quite big enough, and there's just lots of little tweaks that you have to do, and that's mainly for group stage. I think you get away with a few more things sometimes, qualifiers, but group stage they up the requirements a bit. And obviously we've not had that problem to deal with before, so yeah, here we are. It's a nice problem to have, though.
Yes, definitely, and it's very exciting. However, We do have league games until then. We obviously just need to sit back and watch Zurich and Linfield play against each other, and we'll see who we're playing at the end of this month. But we did start actual proper football this past weekend. We all came back to Tynecastle for the first game of the season against Ross County, a side who last season kind of gave us a lot of problems. 3 draws, 1 win in the 4 games that we played against them. And even the win was a very contentious. We were a Connor Randall, I was about to say sitter, but his own player stopped it on the line, equaliser away from not beating Ross County at all last season. So I think some Hearts fans were justifiably a wee bit nervous going into it. And I think the nerves escalated dramatically when everybody saw the team and kind of the man of the moment, the guy who's been doing incredibly well in pre-season, everybody loves. Stephen Kingsley was omitted from the squad completely. And it's come out that in the training the last day before the game, he's picked up a niggle in his hamstring, and it seems to be enough to keep him out for that game. And what we'll speak about at the end of this episode, it looks like the Derby, if we're listening to all the rumours. When you saw that starting lineup with Haring and Smith in the middle, no Kingsley, but a front three of Mackay, Shanklin, Forrest, that's exciting. How did you feel, and how did you feel the game was going to go?
I was disappointed, obviously, that Kingsley wouldn't be involved. He's, one of our best players, arguably our best outfield player last season. I suppose it didn't concern me so much for the game itself pre-match. He's one player. I felt also Kai Rolls is naturally left-footed, so him going to the left side of the defence wasn't a big deal. Craig Halkett, stronger in the centre of that back three, generally for Hearts, than on the right-hand side. I guess the concern is when you get to the right of that defence, Toby Sibic, jury still out a little bit. He has struggled on that side of the defence. I think he settled a little bit more, if I remember rightly, in the centre of it at times, but on that side, he sometimes looked a little bit hesitant, a little bit lost. And I suppose of the 2 wing-backs defensively, Nathaniel Atkinson, that's maybe the weaker side of his game at this point than Alex Cochrane, who's maybe more of a defensive player, although I thought he was absolutely fantastic. So I did, to be honest, disappointed. I guess I was more worried long-term about Kingsley than this Ross County game, pre-game, and that's maybe naive of me given how the opening half an hour would go.
Well, yeah, that's fair, because I think I was like that. I was like, immediately when I saw Kingsley wasn't playing, your natural thought is to go to the Derby this weekend and any potential long-term ramifications. But I was thinking, okay, and I did go to Kai Rolls. I was like, right, Kai looked really good against Stoke. Obviously, it's a pre-season game. However, he did look very good. So I was confident then. And in my opinion, at least, in the first half, he was one of very few positives of that first half, especially that opening 20 minutes, because Ross County came out the traps immediately, and you could tell that they were not there to sit in and try and break on the counter. They were there to be up in their faces. They lined up in a 4-2-3-1, and the main talking point was their new signing on loan from Bristol City, Edwards, on their left-hand side, running up against, as you mentioned, Sibic and Atkinson. And for that first 20 or so minutes, probably until Michael Smith moved there when Atkinson came off, Edwards was running rampant through us continuously.
Oh yeah, he looked a real find. Still only 21, and obviously only a loan deal, but it's a market that Malky Mackay is keen to use, the English market, be that loan deals or permanent signings, younger players as well. Yeah, I thought he was absolutely fantastic, and we were just all over the place. I didn't underestimate County, to be fair. I think after how they played last season, some of their signings on paper looked decent. I expected them to come and not just sit in, but I thought they would play a little bit more on the break, that we would have a bit more of the attacking play and they would try and quickly break. But as you say, we didn't actually get much in the way of attacking opportunities in the first half at all. They did counter, but that was often from pressing and winning the ball in the middle of the park. And the press up towards our defence was impressive as well, I thought. And yeah, I think there was the chance that he whipped in for Samuel, which hit off the post. That came from an Edwards cross. He hit the crossbar with that fantastic shot after he put it around Nathaniel Atkinson. And to be fair to Atkinson, when we first started warming up, a substitute, I just assumed it was going to be tactical, and we had to take him off because we were getting torn to shreds. I think Robbie said afterwards he did have a little bit of a bug, so he hadn't been fully fit anyway. And I know he sat down on the turf, and I think in commentary, Jimmy was like, well, sitting down on the turf just to make it look like it's a bit of a knock to halt proceedings and get him off. But he was run ragged, and we'll maybe just have to write that game off as he wasn't up to full fitness. But certainly they should have been ahead. I mean, hit the bar, hit the post. Sims with a chance after the header hit the post. Yeah. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if he just doesn't expect the ball to come back to him, because he kind of loses his footing and the ball gets caught under his left leg, and he has that hopeful look to the assistant, I think, hoping there's a flag, but there isn't. So yeah, but Jorge Grant, which is not his name, but what everyone wants to call him, came on, and I think he really helped. It wasn't just Smith going to the right, because to be fair, after Atkinson went off, they had another big chance that came from that side within 60 seconds when Jordi Hula came through and Gordon had to save. But I think George Grant coming on the centre, I thought actually probably helped us more than anything. I thought he was very impressive.
I saw a lot of people speaking about the starting of Haring and Smith. Whilst they're both very good on the ball, obviously that's never in doubt. Your initial reaction is it's maybe not pedestrian, that's like not the word, but it's a much less dynamic midfield than one with Devlin and one without Grant. And as you say, Grant came on, and it's not even that he was suddenly demanding the ball all the time and driving us forward. It was just whenever he got the ball, he seemed calm, but always had the ability to drive forward himself. And I think he definitely helped himself for getting into the starting 11 this weekend.
Yeah, there's a big decision to be made this weekend because of that, because I think Cammy Devlin will be well in contention. Obviously missed a couple of pre-season friendlies before the county match, but he'll be in contention for the Hibs game. Smith started it. I would argue that was just a stopgap. I don't think Smith in centre midfield is the answer. I think he's terrific. He's versatile, but when Ross County started to really pressure us and really show their kind of pace and their legs in behind, I thought we started to look very weak in the centre, and that didn't help with kind of the long diagonals. I know Smith kept trying to drop in to help out in the defence, but I don't think he's the answer long term. It's maybe a backup option. So as for who you start in the Derby, I wouldn't be surprised if Robbie Nielsen favoured Cammy Devlin because of the nature of the match. But I think a lot of fans, if you ask them, might lean towards George Grant getting a start, given how he performed when he came on. And like you said, it wasn't just, he didn't come on and do, especially fantastic things straight away, but it was just getting on the ball, looking forward, and kind of carrying Hearts up the pitch rather than the more, I think, pedestrian, like you said, Smith and Haring. I think both great players, but sometimes you need a little bit of a different option beside them to help that dynamic.
Definitely. And I think the second half was a lot more like what we were hoping from the very first minute. And one of the two sets of players that I felt were doing that in the second half were on opposite sides. But Alex Cochrane, as you mentioned earlier, one of the criticisms he received last season when he was on loan is that always very sound defensively, never need to worry about him in that regard. But especially because he's often used as a wing back instead of a full back, people would understandably like him to be a wee bit more involved. He did get 3 goals last season, but when you had a lot of the width having to come from the other side, it was, okay, can Cochrane improve that? I saw a lot of people during the Stoke game compliment him on that. He was giving Harry Clark a really, really tough time, and he really showcased that, I felt, against Ross County. Even in the first half, I felt him and Rolls were kind of the two positives. They were not doing anything exceptional, nobody was, but whenever those two got on the ball, I felt they were doing very well. And our first goal, which was very much undeserved at that point, to be taking the lead, is actually a brilliant goal. And we speak about George Grant as well. He's very key to it. But it's actually picked up by Forrest on the far side as you're looking at it from the commentary table. And Forrest plays it inside to Grant, who has great vision to see Cochrane out his periphery. Played to him. And Cochrane, he could be mistaken to think he needs to put this high for Shankland or just generally fire it across the face of goal, but he actually sees that at least someone is running in, and Forrest does incredibly well to angle his body and just kind of put him bottom corner. And it's a couple of minutes after Forrest went in a great run as well, where he got a couple of lucky bounces of the ball, but you could tell in that second half, Nielsen said that he had to kind of demonstrate the hairdryer a wee bit at halftime. But you could tell that we came out with much more intensity, much more of a plan, apparently, of what seemed to happen. And somehow we're 1-0 up.
Yeah, I really like Alex Cochrane, actually. Sometimes I thought people maybe underestimated him a little bit. Still only 22, only just turned 22 a few months ago, and I thought it was a terrific bit of business to get him on a permanent deal. I didn't actually think we would be able to. There's a few English Championship clubs who are interested, still young, plenty of potential to improve, and always very solid last season, and got forward very well. And I think last season he maybe didn't do it as much as fans would have liked, but I thought there were certainly games where he got forward. Like you said, he got a few goals from wing back or full back. He covered centre back, he covered full back, he covered wing back. I really like him, and I thought he was one of, if not the best player out there for Hearts. Probably was the best player out there for Hearts at the weekend. And it's a lovely goal, and I was pleased for Forrest as well, because he'd not really done anything in the first half, albeit the ball had really barely gone towards the front three in the first half. But like you say, it's a lovely move, and that's what we need sometimes, I think, at home when we're playing teams, because what County did very well, although they were very attacking in the first half, when they had to defend, they got men back in numbers, and they made it very difficult. They've obviously watched plenty of Hearts, as they would, and they'll know that sometimes we will move the ball around, but we won't want to go direct. So if they get 11 men behind the ball, it's up to us to try and knock it around and break them down. So you need players to move around, to drag players left and right, to run into the holes. And I thought Forrest did that very well for the goal. Lovely run. And he did very well to finish it. It was kind of hard to interpret exactly how he got his boot around it and into the bottom corner, but really nice goal. And that's the type of thing I think we need with those type of players, because in the first half, I think someone commented, we're forgetting that Shankland isn't Liam Boyce. Trying to fire it up towards him and get him to kind of take it in, not really his game. He is a very versatile player. He's a bit more versatile than just a poacher, but sometimes we were firing the ball up to him and the Big Ross County defenders were just having a field day. We needed to think outside the box a little bit, and I think that goal showed it. And I was very pleased for Forrest, because what you want with the new signing is to get off the mark quite quickly. And I'm starting to think maybe he'll be a more important player for us this season than I first thought when we signed him, which was that he'll be a squad player.
I think most people did, to be honest. I remember, I think it was literally actually last week on your podcast where Joel Sked was speaking about how he's really excited by Alan Forrest and thinks he could be our signing of the season. And I think a lot of people, when it was initially rumoured, were almost turning their noses up a wee bit, being like, well, we're about to go into Europe. Are we really going to take a Livingston player? But then when you look at how well he did for Livingston last season, you could tell there was a reason we were interested in him. And I felt he's really impressed in pre-season whenever I saw him. And yes, as you say, he didn't have a good first half, but nobody did. So I won't exactly hold that against him. And I felt in the second half, even apart from his goal, he was really heavily involved. And I agree now. I think he could be our starting option on that right-hand side.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the positions that there's been most criticism at, I suppose, last season. In terms of the front three, Barry Mackay is a first pick, Boyce, very good. But that next option, I think last season was one of the positions where people had most question marks, because neither Gary Mackay-Steven or Josh Ginnelly really impressed enough to suggest that they should be first pick. They're obviously both at the club. Whether they'll be at the club still at the end of the window is another matter, but they are still there. But certainly so far, I would say Forrest is doing enough to suggest already that he would be a preferable choice than either of the other two. But it's a good problem to have, because sometimes part of the issue we've had is not having that squad depth in terms of, well, we can't drop players because we don't have many other players to come in and replace them. But I suppose if we've got more options, then maybe if Forrest does drop form, Ginnelly can get a chance, or Gary Mackay-Steven can get a chance, and maybe they'll have to prove it. And if they don't prove it very quickly, then they'll be back out again.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned Shankland. I wanted to ask you about that, because I saw a lot of people kind of going, we don't know what to make of his debut, because he didn't technically do anything, but everybody was in agreement with that wasn't by his design or fault, because there was a couple of times early in the first half where Ross County were really piling on the pressure for us and doing well, where Gordon would go long and Shankland would actually win a flick on, and immediately the crowd would realise, wait, he's meant to be the one running on to a flick on. He's flicking it on to nobody. Boyce came on for him, and I think some fans potentially wanted to see a period of time with them playing together, because especially ahead of this derby, the front four, if you include Boyce with the starting three that started, Shankland, Mackay and Forrest, all four of them probably played quite well at the weekend. Boyce came on and did his usual of just allowing freedom of movement, linking up. Mackay scored his goal that we'll get to. Forrest scored his goal, and Shankland was a bit unfair to criticise him because he was trying his best. And what do you see the system being with both of them? Do you think we'll ever see both of them playing together?
I think we will. The honest truth is how they'll both fit in, I'm not quite sure yet, because I think last season when we saw the best of Boyce, it was when we had Ellis Sims as the number 9, and Boyce was kind of playing in behind. So they had him and Barry Mackay, kind of that dual 10s that Robbie Nielsen likes to do sometimes. So he almost played that 3-4-2-1.
Yeah.
Rather than maybe the slightly wider players that we can sometimes utilize. And Sims was great at that because he can flick it on, he can hold it, and he had great body strength. His hold-up play was fantastic, the way he could hold off defenders. But Shankland's a bit of a different player, so I don't know yet. I think it's a good option to have, but in a game like Saturday, he did get very isolated because you want him being the player, like you say, running off a flick on or getting onto through balls, but he wasn't getting anything to work with. He was expected to come in, pick it up, and I know that's what he often had to do at Dundee United, was drop in and try and pick the ball up and create things, and Dundee United weren't creating very much in the top flight. And I think he even said when he was in Belgium, at times he was playing wing back.
Yes.
So the honest truth is, I don't know. I think there will be games that we'll see will be very good for Lawrence Shankland up front on his own. There'll be games where it won't work and we'll need someone like Boyce. I suppose that is my concern, is that we haven't replaced Ellis Sims in terms of neither of those players are an Ellis Sims. So do we lose that option to really go direct? Because Ross County kind of seemed to force us into that. You see, they pressed the centre backs and made them play it long, and we couldn't really make anything of that because there wasn't a Boyce to hold it in and there wasn't a Sims to flick it on. Shankland, like I say, he won a couple of balls, but it's not really his game.
He did his best.
He did his best. So that would be my one concern, would be, will teams think, right, if we force him direct, because that's what Sims gave us, that extra dynamic in the second half of the season. We were starting to not falter, but we started to look a little bit one-dimensional. Teams had started to work us out, made it difficult, forced Boyce back, and we ended up with no one up front because Boyce kept dropping deep. We had no strikers, and it nullified our threat. Sims changed that dynamic. So we maybe just haven't quite got to grips with how do we use Shankland in that team yet.
I think that's fair. One player who is definitely...
That was a long way of me saying I don't know.
That's fair, though. I'm fully on board with that. Someone who's been consistently great and winging everything is Barry Mackay. I actually felt he didn't have his best game at the weekend. He was doing his usual of trying to find these outside the foot passes, but more often than not, they weren't kind of coming off for him. But then he is one of those players where everybody forgets about that when he does what he did, because Cochrane plays a very long ball, funnily enough, speaking about Sims, similar to the one he played for Sims at Dundee United last season. And somehow, despite him being surrounded by a few players, Barry Mackay manages to get his foot in between all of them, whip it to the side, takes those defenders out of the equation. The keeper comes out because obviously he has to do something. Barry Mackay shows the intelligence to take a further touch, and all he has to do is pass it in the net. I've seen people say it's already a contention for goal of the season. We're on day one. But my biggest happiness with it is that it took Barry Mackay 30 games last season to score for Hearts, whereas now, day one, he scored. Obviously, you were on commentary for it, and I've heard your commentary. But just, is he one of those players that people will be a lot more forgiving to having games like he did on Saturday, because he will always have the ability to do what he ended up doing?
Absolutely. I mean, that touch is step above what you'd normally get in the Scottish Premiership, to be honest. It's normally something you'd maybe see, like Jota's goal for Celtic against Aberdeen. That's what, when I watch that game, that's like, see, that's why you can't compete with Celtic and Rangers, because they've got players who can just blink of an eye, do something like that. And it's a player which is worth, what 7 million quid or whatever Celtic paid. And it's like, that's the wage bill, or bigger wage bill than most of the top flight clubs. But Barry Mackay, that is a touch. You can't normally find a player with that technical ability who'll be playing in Scotland outside of Glasgow generally. And you're spot on with that. You have to forgive a player like that because goals win games, and if you're someone who can create a goal or score a goal at the blink of an eye, then it's the same way the man who's behind me. I mean, you famously hear people and fellow teammates of Scatchell saying he was lazy. He didn't do much. He walked around, played to the crowd. He didn't track back. He would go through games and have barely any involvement, but then bang, he'd pick it up 30 yards from goal, smash in the top corner, and you're like, well, that's why he gets away with it. Yeah. And although Barry Mackay, to this date, hasn't got the goal scoring record of Scatchell, I think it was 12 assists last season, and 2 goals. So 14 direct goal involvements. I think, if you want to call it that, that is impressive. And if he can come up with a brilliant cross, a brilliant pass, or a sensational touch that creates a goal, you will get away with not being in the game that much. So yeah, you'll let him off with a quiet match, but just fantastic. And I'm similar to Cochrane. I'm surprised that we managed to keep him any longer. I know he was still contracted, but I didn't think we'd get him on an extension. So another terrific bit of business, and yeah, just a fantastic player, and hopefully a lot more goals this season.
Well, at this point, you think it's all plain sailing. We've somehow got to 2-0 up when we should have been 2-0 down at half time. However, there was one issue in the second half, as pretty soon after, 2 minutes later, as people around me were saying, can we get to 3-0? Immediately, we're pegged back to 2-1, as it's from our throw-in, funnily enough, and I think it's Baldwin at the back for Ross County, just sends a long ball over the top, and Kai Rolls is either flat-footed or he's just what I actually think is happening. He's not expecting it at all. Goes over his head, and Jordan White, in fairness to him, times his run brilliantly, ends up one-on-one. Gordon tries his best to make himself big. White realises that, so just slots it underneath his feet. It then creates a nervy 12 minutes, which we do then see out. But the main takeaway from this is Kai Rolls obviously had a very good game generally, but is this something you put down to, as Nielsen said, where it's just he's still coming into the team, getting used to everything, or is it a potential worry that during the whole game, on all sides, we seem to be getting caught out, as you said, from that counter, that ball over the top where they were starting to run in behind?
I think it has to be a concern. I don't think it's a major concern at this point because we're still early. We still won the game, but it was it concerned me a lot in the first half as well. It was very simple for Ross County to get in behind us a few times. Fair enough, Edwards was fantastic, but there was a couple of times they just launched it back to front. They tended to be targeting our right-hand side quite a bit, but a few times they just launched it over the top, and Civic, for someone who's pretty tall, sometimes seems to misjudge longer balls a tad. I don't know if it's his positioning or just his kind of awareness, but he sometimes seems to be caught out. He does have the advantage that he's got a reasonable turn of pace, so he can sometimes recover, but that does concern me a little bit. So I don't know if it's just a newish defensive line, because Rolls, like you say, was pretty solid throughout, but that one was a bit worrying, straight over the top. And in some ways, Gordon is usually where he excels, is making himself big. I thought he almost committed too early. He threw himself out and up in the air, and it was almost decided for, if a keeper goes down really early, you can see the striker decides he'll try and dink him. And if he does that, makes himself really big, kind of sprawls out in the air, he kind of left it open. So maybe not as, I won't blame him for the goal, but maybe not his best bit of goalkeeping from that sense. But yeah, it made it very nervy, and it was ironic. It was probably the time where County had looked least threatening was when they scored, but it's the old kind of cliche of you're at your most vulnerable immediately after scoring a goal. We'd scored, we had a couple of subs, and it felt like the ground had kind of relaxed. We've won the game now, it's 2-0, it's done and dusted. And I don't know if that did emanate onto the park a little bit, because it felt like everyone just fell asleep, and suddenly it was like, oh shit.
Yep, exactly.
This isn't done yet, there's still 10 minutes to go.
Well, thankfully, we did see it out, started the season off with a win, which gives us the perfect momentum going into this Saturday. Immediately, to Ron Gordon's disgust, there is an Edinburgh Derby this weekend. And first of all, I feel like we just kind of need to speak about the situation Hibs are in, because it's been an eventful pre-season for Hibs, to say the least. They've had a pretty disastrous League Cup campaign by their standards, obviously knocked out by both performances and admin-based errors, we'll put it like that. However, they, of course, did also get off to a winning start this weekend, a 90th minute winner away at St Johnstone. Kind of a game marred by controversy as well, with debatable red cards and debatable cards that weren't red. Overall, before we speak about how you're feeling about the game in particular, how do you feel about Hibs generally going into this season?
They're a bit of an unknown. As much as we've had a laugh at some of the calamities going on there, as much as I'm not entirely sure about Lee Johnson, they are a very unknown quantity, to be honest. I thought when we played them, when they had Maloney in charge, I thought it was evident very quickly that it was not going to work. It was Cathro-esque. I think I was almost entirely confident that Sean Maloney would not be a success at Hibs and it wouldn't last very long. With Lee Johnson, I don't know. He's got a bit more behind him, managerial-wise. Some of their signings on paper looked reasonably promising. Hibs got, at the same way, you get excited about some signings which there's no proof in the pudding yet because they've done it in a B team in Portugal or you've not seen him play in Scotland yet. But a lot of signings, I think probably 9 or 10 in the end, have signed, not all first team players. So there is a little bit of an unknown about Hibs. I still think, pound for pound, when I look at them, even though I don't know an awful lot about some of the new signings, that we still look a better side with a more settled side. I don't want any complacency about this game. I don't necessarily know that Hibs will be mugs. It's just still a lot up in the air. So I hope we go into the game with a decent mindset, and I do hope that we take the game to them, because I guess you're going to talk about the formation. I'll let you get to that. But they are such an unknown quantity, like Falkirk, total calamity. But they managed to get a win in the end. And although it wasn't, by all accounts, the greatest game, some dodgy decisions, they ground out a result. It's a place that we've not won at in the league in 12 years. So, I'm wary about underestimating Hibs at this point.
That's basically exactly where I am. I've got a few Hibs mates, and knowing the Terrace guys, speaking to them and seeing how they're feeling, there's a general kind of sense of pessimism, but sprinkled in optimism in specific areas. And one of the main optimistic parts comes from Ellie Yuan, the new striker that they've brought in, who obviously, again, is, as you say, very unknown, but the small sample size we've seen of him, he does annoyingly look actually to be quite a good signing. He scored 5 against the Norwich B team, which, again, how much can you read into that kind of result? But still, scoring 5 in any game at the age he's at is pretty impressive. Porteous is obviously his own enigma in and of himself, but I agree generally. I think that our squad overall is better than theirs, but it does worry me that there is an element of, oh, it's fine. Yep, we're flying high. Hibs are getting beat by admin issues. We should be fine. Whereas I think even just watching the St Johnstone highlights and speaking to people, there is definitely an aspect of, well, they have strengths. We do have weaknesses. And you said there about the formation. I want to ask, what formation would you play? Because there's been a lot of debate about, do we stick with the 3? Do we move? There's been discussion about 4-2-3-1s and stuff like that. What do you feel? Do you feel that we need a formation change in general with Kingsley out? Or do you feel that if Kingsley is missing, which by all accounts he is, we just need a formation change for this one specific game?
I think we need, and I think Robbie will do this, I don't think we necessarily have to have one formation over the other. I think throughout the season we will see a 3-4-3 and we will see a 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, however you want to look at it. And you will see it switch in games as well sometimes. Obviously, the frequency of either one might depend on how successful we are being or who's available and who's not. For this game, my preference would be to go with a 4, and I would probably do that regardless of Kingsley being in or out. However, if he's out, I would definitely want a 4. And part of it very simply is Hibs will play a 4-2-3-1/4-3-3. They'll play a similar system And pound for pound, like I say, I think we have better players. So I'd rather match up, which I know it's oversimplifying it to an extent, but I'd rather match up because I think we've got better players. 3-4-3, it works when we've got everyone available who we need to, but I still, with John Souttar gone, if we're allowed to say his name still, that right side of the back three concerns me a little bit because Sibic doesn't look very comfortable there. Atkinson at right wing back is still yet to prove himself defensively, I would say.
Yeah, I agree.
And I know we put Halkett there with Rolls in the middle and Kingsley left in some of the preseason games, but I think we're then moving Halkett away from his strongest position because he actually, when he was getting a lot of criticism, he was playing on the right or at some points the left, but mainly the right of the back three, whereas when he moved to the centre, he was much more impressive. And I think it helped that Kingsley and Souttar both comfortable to step out. So one steps out, kind of move into almost the four, the other steps out. So I would personally want to go with a 4. A lot of it matching up, a lot of it to do with potential who's available as well.
Could I get a team from you? Because I also agree. I have not hesitancy because I think even just as a player over the last 18 months, Halkett's really grown and kind of stepped up as well. There is a perhaps worry that he kind of previously struggled in a 2, but I always put that down to he had the partner he was with in a 2 was either a pension age Christoph Berra with one knee and Mihai Popescu, who I don't even think he knew what he was ever going to do at any time. So I always felt Halkett was let down by that. Even just with 2 games of sample size I've seen him, I feel like Kai Rolls is a much more calming influence than either of those 2, so is better equipped. So I can guess your goalkeeper, unless you're properly throwing a spanner in the works and going with Ross.
Certainly not.
But I'm gonna get an 11.
Okay. So I didn't plan this one, so I'm just having a look now I'm just typing something. I would probably go Smith right, Cochrane left of a back 4 with Halkett and Rolls in the centre. Now I'm basing this on Kingsley not playing.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know that for sure, but just the vibe I get with a hamstring strain. I don't know. Yeah. I'm just going to assume he's not in. So probably a 4-2-3-1. Centre is an interesting one because I would probably go with Haring and Grant in the centre with an attacking 3 of Forrest, Boyce and Mackay and Shankland up front. I have put Haring / Devlin, but it's very difficult. Of the midfielders, you'd say Grant would be the strongest one to pick because I didn't think Haring was bad, especially the weekend, but he wasn't at his best. I'd be very surprised if he didn't give him a start in the derby. So I'd be inclined to go Haring and Grant, but I wouldn't be surprised if Robbie would favour Haring and Devlin.
I'm personally the exact same as you. I would pick that starting 11, but for me it is that 2 as well. And there is a part of me that would like to see Devlin and Grant start together. However, the thing is in pre-season games, I think Devlin and Grant have played with each other twice. I think Crawley and Preston were the 2 games, or Crawley and Tranmere actually. And Devlin was actually the one pushing forward more.
Yeah.
Which I didn't find surprising because Devlin's whole thing is just Duracell Bunny run about all the time. But with what we've heard and now seen of Grant, where he seems to be the superior attacking player in terms of Devlin often gets into positions and then doesn't do a lot with it because that's just not his game. So I don't know if a 2 of Devlin and Grant would work because I feel like Devlin's energy for a derby, especially away from home, is great and really needed. But I would rather Grant be the one progressing forward because I feel like he could actually do more damage. So it is hard because Haring also is just so good at calming everything and settling everything down.
Yeah, no, it is a tough one, that part of the field, but I would certainly favour that kind of the 4-2-3-1. I would like to see Boyce in that sort of number 10 role, and I think Forrest, Boyce, Mackay all supporting Shankland. I think that would really benefit us in terms of creating chances and maybe bridging that gap between Shankland and the other players that maybe we saw a bit too much of in terms of the gap on Saturday. Whether Robbie would go, I suppose, maybe as attacking as that, to have Forrest, Boyce, Mackay and Shankland all on, effectively a front 4. I'm not sure. He would maybe want to keep that option in reserve. And I suppose the other option is he could possibly start Haring, Devlin, and Grant.
Yeah,
and maybe put Grant more forward. He wouldn't quite be a 10, but someone who can move up. And you can rotate it, I suppose, if you wanted, like I said, push Devlin into that position. We've done that a few times. So he maybe would want to do something like that earlier on and use someone like Boyce off the bench as an option if we haven't found a goal and we need to chase the game a little bit more.
I think that's the biggest thing this season. It's just, whilst there was concerns about Kingsley not playing at the weekend and concerns about him not being here, but we just finally have a squad where I trust most, if not all, the players to at least help us do something. Maybe not Ross Stewart, but generally in terms of outfield positions, as you say, it's like we could put Devlin here. He has qualities that others don't have. Haring, Grant, could move Mackay across the front three, Forrest across the front three. I like the idea of Mackay and Forrest with Boyce in the middle behind Shankland, because whilst obviously, as we were saying, Shankland isn't just stand on the penalty spot, shoot type of striker. He can do other things. It means that he doesn't need to worry about that other stuff as well, because Boyce is exceptional at that link up. Yes, he perhaps doesn't score as many as some people feel he should or want to, but what he brings to us is so useful. And I want to see him and Shankland together because I just feel it would work well.
Yeah. And I think, apart from anything, I want us to take the game to Hibs. And that's, maybe sounds strange because I'm saying I don't want us to underestimate Hibs, but, sometimes one of the criticisms of Robbie Neilson has been in certain games being overly cautious, maybe at Easter Road. And I feel like Hibs, although they got some good players, we don't want to let them settle into the game, let them try and get a grip of it. I think we should take the game to them. We've got the better players. We have a better record at Easter Road over the course of history than they do. Yeah. I'd like to see us not go gung-ho. It doesn't mean I want us to be attack, but try and play on the front foot and try and, I suppose, dominate the ball and be the team that are creating the chances. Because I tell you what, that Easter Road crowd will very soon turn up, like the Tynecastle crowd turned on Hearts very early on Saturday, and I understood it because we were getting taken apart by Ross County, and I have no doubt that nervousness kind of fed onto the pitch as well. What you want to do at Easter Road is, they'll be up for it before the game. It'll be a good atmosphere for the home fans. They'll obviously be getting right behind the side early on. If we come out and we're taking the game to them, not even necessarily scoring, but if we are the ones attacking, creating chances, very quickly that crowd will turn on the home players. And a lot of them are fairly new signings. They won't be used to that. Some of them have been there before and they'll know what it's like when things are down. So I'd want to kind of not let them settle into a game, not let them get the fans behind them and kind of turn it against them early on. And obviously with our support there, again, they'll be very vociferous. It won't take long for them to start dominating off the field. So that's what I would like to see on Sunday midday.
Very much agreed. I want a score prediction, and much like you guys do, I want a goal scorer as well.
Oh, okay. Well, obviously have to go with the Hearts win. I'm going to say a 2-0 Hearts win. And although it's very obvious, I'm going to go Shankland. It's kind of like, it's picking the obvious goal scorer, but he's going to show what he can do on Sunday.
I'd very much like that. I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as that. I'm going to go 2-1. I think we're going to concede just purely because I think they'll go to do what Malcolm Mackay did and go focus on Civic if he plays. If he doesn't, then I think if our team plays, because we're clearly superior tactically, we'll win 2-0. No worries at all.
Well, that's what I'm basing it on.
Yeah, that's true. Then.
I'll blame Robbie Neilson if we concede. Yes, he didn't go with my team.
Exactly. And I'm going to go with Forrest again. I'm going to go that he's going to keep going. I trust him. And he seems to go mental with celebrations, so I want him to go properly mental. Or it might be a new signing that we've not.
Oh, I'd love it to be. I'd love it to be a new signing. It's a good way to endear yourself to the Hearts fans.
Well, that's before we go on to the quiz, the final little piece is that late last night, out of nowhere, we got linked with one of those signing rumours that is exciting just because no one's really heard of them. And it's not a Scottish player, as Lee Seung-woo, the South Korean international, former of Barcelona, is apparently not close to signing, but Barry Anderson, the oracle of all Hearts information, has said that we're at least making contact with him. The left winger slash number 10 area has done very, very well in the past half season, I guess you want to call it, in his native homeland, with 10 goals and 2 assists in 22 games. Very highly thought of when he was younger. There was a bit of controversy as he was part of the legal case with Barcelona that he was viewed alongside many other players to be signed under malicious content, so wasn't able to play for 3 years for Barcelona, and then moved for £1 million a couple of times to Italy, and then is back in his native homeland. What do you make of the potential signing that seems to have got everybody just fully on board off the rumour alone?
It's our South Korean World Cup star, 16 years too late, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Is he related to Ang Jong-wan in any way? No.
I don't know.
A very exciting prospect, I suppose. Not the type of signing. I think people get excited about a signing like this because it's very different to what we're used to. Not just because it's South Korean, but it's a tricky, skillful, slight number 10. I know he can play kind of inside forward or number 10, but you saw from the clips of people he talked about, he's short, he's skillful, he's got a lot of pace. On paper, very exciting. I mean, obviously came through the Barca youth system, got some games in Serie A and Serie B with Hellas Verona, brief spell in Portugal under Paulo Sergio, some time in Belgium as well. But I suppose if we're really going to caveat that and play devil's advocate as well, I guess the concern is Ryotaro Meshino had a decent pedigree, maybe not quite as good a pedigree because he'd not really done much in Europe at that point, but he was a similar type of player in terms of kind of a typical what you see from a lot of the South Korean and Japanese attacking players. They tend to have these very slight, quick, and I think they called him the South Korean Messi.
Yeah,
they tend to favor that type of football, that type of attacking player, where they're quick and skillful, but they're not going to want to get involved in too much of the physical side of the game. And that's where Meshino, I thought, really fell down. You can discuss his overall quality beyond that, but I think that was a big thing. You know, physically, he got bullied around. He wanted to get the ball down, try his flicks, try and take players on. Sometimes Scottish game is not the best for that. I think you have to be a very good player to be that type of player and do well in our league. Furuhashi is a typical example of that. He can do it in our league because he is a terrific player. He's almost a step above what you'd often get in Scotland. So that would be my concern. Is he certainly looks great, and you see clips of him playing in the K League, but that is a very technical league. It's not as physical. You're not going to come up against as many big burly defenders and central midfielders that will just kick you around. So I guess that would be my concern. But if he can do what he's done in a lot of the clips we've seen, I'd be very excited. However, I think his agent is basically suggesting he's quite happy at the moment. So there is interest, but it's not close to a deal at this point. So
we'll see. I don't think he's going to be scoring the winner this weekend, basically.
I would be, if he does sign for Hearts, I'd be very surprised if it was in time for Sunday and in time to be playing on Sunday. But certainly it's interesting. I do like us looking out of the box at players like that, and we don't have, it's similar to Barry Mackay in many ways, and sometimes you could say that of Barry Mackay, that he's quite slight. He maybe, if the game gets into a bit of a battle physical, he maybe does fade away sometimes. But yeah, it's sometimes quite a culture shock because I know he's played in Italy. I would be lying if I said I watched a lot of the Portuguese league or the Belgian league, but certainly in Italy, it can be still a fair bit more technical than the Scottish league. So it'd just be how he would acclimatise to the difference in the game.
Well, we will wait and see, and hopefully he does arrive, and hopefully he's class. But we will end with a quiz, as we have done recently. These are, the first half is Derby focused, and then there's a couple other questions, and then there's a who am I, who I'm telling you now, you cannot do as bad as Adam. Adam is currently 0-2 for the who am I's.
However, this game,
yes, he has thought of the person both times, but just didn't say them, and then was like, oh, for God's sake, I should have said. So you've got that. At least you've got that. However, we'll start. So the first three questions are all Derby related. So number one, who was the last player to score a hat-trick in an Edinburgh Derby?
Oh, last player to score a hat-trick. Has anyone done it since Mark DeVries scored a hat-trick? I'm just going to say Mark De Vries because I don't know if anyone's got a hat-trick since then.
You're going to kick yourself. You're incorrect, as Paul Hartley scored.
Oh, shit. Fuck off, Laurie.
That's a great
That is
start.
terrible. That is terrible. I'm embarrassed.
Maybe the Adam shout wasn't as good as I thought it was going
No,
to be.
that's terrible. I'm not getting back on with that. That is awful.
Let's see if you can redeem yourself with question 2. As how many goals were scored across all derbies last season? Not all Dundee and our derbies. The 4 games we played, how many goals were scored?
0-0, 3-1, 4, 7.
Yes, correct. You're on the board.
I'm okay at maths.
Yeah. Right. Here's a true or false. So you've got 50-50 chance.
Okay.
Aside from Hibs, the Scottish club Hearts have beaten the most is Dundee. True or false?
Oh, that's a good question. The Scottish club Hearts have beaten the most aside from Hibs. True.
It's actually false. I thought it was true. I assumed it was true as well. It's actually Motherwell.
Okay. I'll be honest, it was a guess.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't think you'd have documentary knowledge of all of this. But yeah, I didn't expect it to be Motherwell as the actual answer.
That's, I guess, breaking it down, maybe, I mean, Dundee have had quite a few games outside of the top flight and we weren't playing them, maybe.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, this one is a multiple choice one, and I've made it deliberately annoying. And you won't know this fact, it's going to be a guess, because I saw it on Twitter today and I was like, that's interesting. Okay. When did Tynecastle officially open?
1886.
Well, okay, you've got that. I didn't even need to give you the options. Okay.
I knew that. Well, I don't know why I knew that, and I didn't know that Paul Hartley's going to have to.
Well, fair play. You got that without even... That's better than Adam's ever done. So you've got that.
I mean, to be honest, I have an advantage on that one because in 2006, I arranged a card display in the Wheatfield stand, which marked 120 years of Tynecastle, and it said 1886.
Fair enough.
And so probably a slight advantage. And I was literally talking about that card display in the last week because it came up when we were talking about card displays because of the wonderful Drew Busby display that took place at the weekend.
I promise I didn't know that. That wasn't just to give Laurie an easy answer.
Oh, well, you've given me an easy question. I got it wrong. So
that's true. That's very true. So finally, it is the Who Am I? So I've got 5 clues for you. I signed for Hearts from an Eredivisie side. I scored on my debut as a substitute, and it was the only goal I scored for the club.
Kenny Anderson.
It's immediately Kenny Anderson. That's the best you've had of Who Am I? I've at least needed all the clues. That's
because he scored against Livy and then he was pish. I think he only played 9 times.
Well, this is the thing. The next clue was going to be he had to play 9 times in order to get a medal for the championship season, which he did because he came on in the 2-2 draw on the final day against Rangers. There was other clues where he was rumoured amongst Hearts fans to only be signed to appease Zeefuik because Zeefuik wanted a Dutch mate. And to speak to. Finally, the last clue was going to be, despite only turning 30 this year, I retired in 2020 after falling all the way down to the Dutch amateur level, which I was really surprised to see.
I wasn't surprised to see that.
Well, that's true, actually.
Because he was rubbish.
It's Kenny Anderson. But yeah, so the clue, because some people were going to... I saw people speaking about the game he came on because it is the infamous game where Sam Nicholson got
boot in the face.
Yeah, and no red card was given, but he replaced Sam Nicholson. So that is the best. Forget your Paul Hartley question. You've redeemed yourself.
I can't. I should have got that one right and everything else wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But that was, I think, barring that, which now will live on forever online, that was a very respectable effort in the quiz. So well done.
It was too obvious. It was too obvious, that question. Threw me with the obviousness.
Because I thought of Mark De Vries as well. I saw that. It was like, who was the last man? And I was like, well, Mark De Vries immediately. And then I was like, well, no, wait, Paul Hartley. So I wanted to see if you did the exact same thing as me, which you did.
At least I didn't even consider there would have been a Hibs player, though.
Exactly. there hasn't been for fucking ages. So
since Mixu Patalainen.
Yeah, Mixu was the last one. So hopefully that doesn't change this weekend. I feel like we've jinxed it now. I feel like we've knackered it by you forgetting Paul Hartley. The gods are going to be like, right, okay.
Oh, dear.
Well, what an amazing way to end Laurie's debut on the podcast. But thank you very much for coming on and covering for Adam.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
No worries. I know everybody will know already, but tell people how to find Scarves Around the Funnel and yourself on Twitter.
Yeah, if you want to listen to a different Hearts podcast than this one, or in addition to, yes, you can find us in all the usual places to listen, all the podcast apps, Apple, Spotify, etc. And you can find us on Twitter at Around the Funnel. And we'll be recording tomorrow or today when this is going out.
Yes, absolutely. So we are obviously at Perth to Paisley on all the social medias. Likewise, you can get us and all the podcast apps and YouTube. If you've enjoyed this, please give us a subscribe on there. I'll be back next week with another guest because Adam's still going to be away to review the Edinburgh Derby, hopefully one that we've won, see an update in the European situation and preview the Dundee night game. But until then, see you next time. Bye-bye.